Hey everybody, what's going on? I know I did this yesterday, but I had some extra time and I'm feeling the eclipse energy on my end, and I just thought I would kind of connect and provide a venue for people to talk about what's going on, how they're feeling the eclipse, how things are going for them, what's impacting them, and just to have some general eclipse talk. So please feel free to type some things into the chat window over here. Something I'm not that keen on doing, and somebody decided the other day that they wanted to criticize me for this, but really I have your best intent in mind with this, and my own best intent too, because, you know, as an astrologer, I don't want to say something about your chart that's not accurate. I really don't. So people are quite prone to coming on here and kind of saying where their ascendant is and a couple of planets and expecting me to give them some really wonderful eclipse prediction. And I can't really do it like that. I really need your full horoscope. What I can do, though, is to guide you in the right direction of some of the things you need to look out for. Okay? Is people born during the next few days, is it considered bad luck to have Rahu Sun conjunction? There's no such thing as bad luck. It's just karma. Really, you know, it's not bad luck. It's just people have karma that they have to fulfill. So they're born with their planets in a certain place because it's their destiny to have that. Okay. But some things you want to watch out for really is if the eclipse is perhaps transiting the 8th house of your chart, or if it's transiting the 6th, or if it's transiting the 12th, then that can be a pretty, prominent position. And this is a pretty powerful eclipse because it's also connecting with Mars. And so that makes it a little more intense. But also, eclipses are really dasha dependent too. You have to kind of tie it in with the dasha. You have to also tie it in with the nodal axis in the person's chart in order to really have a good, clear idea of what's going on for an individual, which is why I'm not that wild about you just telling me your ascendant and a couple of other things, or even like 20 planets in your chart and expecting me to kind of read it all on the spot. Because really, in terms of reading things for people in association with the eclipse, I go into all the Varga charts, I do all of those things, and I don't feel comfortable doing anything unless I'm doing that, right? Okay. So if the eclipse happens to be transiting your Mahadasha Lord, that can be pretty intense, right? Or if your Mahadasha Lord is dispositing the sun, that can make it pretty intense. Or if you're in Rahu and Ketu Dasha, that can also make it pretty intense too. And does that mean if you don't have all those factors, the eclipse isn't going to be intense? No, it doesn't mean that. And does it mean if you do have those factors that your life is wrecked for the rest of your life? No, it doesn't mean that either, right? Eclipses mark change, rather prominent change. And the impact of those changes usually goes on for several months after the actual eclipse happens, okay? If you would like for me to look at the eclipse for you, it doesn't have to happen before the eclipse. It's not like you've missed your window of opportunity. Basically, you're going to be likely going through changes in association with this particular eclipse for the next several months, right? Do you need to make a big, huge deal out of the eclipse? Well, it is a pretty powerful eclipse, I'll give it that. But at the same time, it's, not like we don't have these all the time, okay? Total solar eclipses can happen pretty regularly too. It's just right now that total solar eclipse is over the States, and there's a large media presence in the States. And so that makes it so that it's a bigger story. It hits the worldwide media in a bigger level, and that's why it's a big deal right now. Okay, so I'm going to look at some of the questions that people are putting in the question window over here, because that's why I came here today, just to kind of help to calm people down in association with the eclipse so that people are not really, having such a difficult time. So somebody said my Saturn is at 3 degrees Leo. So that would most likely put the eclipse pretty close to your Saturn. So if you're in a Saturn Mahadasha or Antardasha, or anything like that, then that's going to be even more prominent. So you might want to look at the houses ruled by Saturn. A general thing that's good to do too with this particular eclipse, and I mentioned this yesterday, but I'll mention it again, is to look at where Mars is ruling in the chart. That's also going to be a prominent place for everybody where the eclipse will play itself out. Also, anytime you have a Rahu Sun connection, there's always this thing of direction. Which direction do I want to go in? Because on a mild level, when you have a Rahu Sun connection, and this happens natally in the chart, but also it can happen during an eclipse time, is when it's happening during eclipse time, which is a transit, when Rahu's connecting with the sun, then one of the things that you can have in that particular regard is a momentary identity crisis. And that's on a certain level why we freak out when Rahu's connecting with the sun, because we're, suffering a certain level of an identity crisis in direction with where that eclipse is impacting in the chart, whatever house it's transiting. Okay, so let's see what else everybody is saying here. Okay, what kind of impact will the eclipse have on an exalted Mars? That's a very broad question. I can't really give you an answer to that. It would depend on what dasha you're in. A lot of things like that. And so you're saying exalted Mars. I see what you're saying. Well, if you have an exalted Mars, the reason I'm saying Mars is a pretty big factor in association with this eclipse is because Mars is in close proximity to the sun and to Rahu. And so that can make it on a certain level that, basically Mars is combust right now. So the areas that Mars rules in your chart is going to be something that's being brought to the forefront right now, and a difficult area for you. If you have an exalted Mars in your chart, you're probably able to handle it a little more easily, but that being the case, you're also going to have, even though it's a Rashi aspect by transit, there is going to be some influence on Rahu to Mars. Rahu-Mars connections too can bring power struggles with other people. So be cautious getting into arguments today. If there's something you need to debate or to discuss, tread lightly. That's one thing I would say too. Let's see whatever else anyone else is saying. I love my wonderful grammar sometimes. What about if there is a planet at 4 degrees of Aquarius? Well, that planet can be impacted by the eclipse too. So if a planet is being aspected by the eclipse, those are prominent areas too. Whatever those planets are ruling, that's going to be impacted by the eclipse. Yes, you finally caught me live. All the rest of this time I've been dead. No, I'm only kidding. I just couldn't resist a good joke. Okay, or a bad joke. I can't resist a bad joke is really what it's about. All right, so let's see whatever else, somebody else, anyone else. Okay. Today I have decided to only stay home and meditate. That's a good idea. But by the same token, I do want to say that a lot of people are freaking out about the eclipse, right? This happens quite often. So if you did something 6 months ago with the eclipse that was then don't let it stop you from doing something now. But staying home and meditating is always a good thing to do. You have Venus, Sun, Mercury, Sun, and Mars in Leo from 2 to 4 degrees. That's a lot of planets being impacted. This is going to be a major shifting period for you. I'm not going to go into specifics because I don't have your horoscope, okay? How long will the impact of the eclipse place? People differ on that opinion, but basically the model idea that I use is basically when you have eclipse periods, there's always a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse within 2 weeks of each other. So that's one minor eclipse portal, right? That 2-week period. Okay, but there's also a major eclipse portal, which is happening all the time, which is the 6 months in between eclipses. Now, a lot of people will say 9 months, but really, I feel that whole 6 months is pretty prominent. Usually, I've noticed about 3 months into the period, you start really noticing how things are turning over in your life in association with the eclipse. But don't see it as a negative thing. See it as an opportunity for change. right? You have all these planets transiting your chart. You have all planets in your chart because they're representing an opportunity for you to grow. Really, what your chart is about is it's about your karma. People tend to focus on it being about, you know, their job or their finances or their home or their dog or their relationship or their car or all these concrete things in their life. But it's also the essence that's underneath that, which is your karma that's creating all these things, right? Which is why, again, I don't like to go too deeply into analyzing people's charts when they put a lot of information on the screen, right? Okay. Somebody says, first off, hi, Michael. Hello. Good to see you. Okay. So let's see. I'm sorry to hear that, Ask Universe. I really am. All my prayers go out to you. Ascendant at 4 degrees Leo and dollar sun is at 4 degrees Aquarius. Those are going to be some pretty, anytime you have the eclipse forming an angle to another planet in your chart, that's a powerful thing. All aspects are important with the eclipse, if it's there with degree. What is the orb of influence? Different people will differ in that opinion. I'm going to kind of give you something that is complicated, but hopefully you can figure it out. But it's a good rule of thumb in terms of judging intensity of aspects, especially, right? If a planet is in the same 3 degree 20-minute section of the sky, it becomes a very intense transit. Okay. Now, I'm not saying a 3 degree 20-minute orb. I'm saying 3 degree 20-minute section of the sky. So let me explain what I mean by that. And I'm going to go through the list. If you have a planet, let's say in Leo, and let's say you've got another planet, say over in Sagittarius, and both of those planets are between 0 to 3 degrees 20 minutes of their sign, that's a powerful aspect. So 0 to 320, 320 to 640, 640 to 10, 10 to 1320, 1320 to 1640, 1640 to 20, 20 to 2320, 2320 to 2640, 2640 to 0, the end of a sign. So that's what I mean when I say the same 3 degree 20-minute section of sky, because they're in the same 1/9 division, which doesn't mean they're going to be in the same sign in the Navamsa chart. That's not what I'm saying. But they are in the same Navamsa because they're in the same 1/9 division of their respectful signs. Okay, so those become very powerful aspects. Okay, that's how I would answer that question in terms of orb of influence. Now let's see. I'm getting lots of no, yes, and no questions right now. Okay, so somebody say something. Unable to take the day off. Well, you know, it's no big deal if you're unable to take the day off. Really, just keep quiet and focus on your own energy as much as you can. How can we use Magha Nakshatra? Are there any rituals to do today, like feeding cows or planting flowers for the Pitrus? Honor your ancestors. That's one thing to do. Here's another way you can use Magha Nakshatra. Be humble. That's the biggest one. Be humble, right? You don't need to do anything fancy. A big thing that you need to do with Magha Nakshatra is that you need to be humble. Because I'm going to kind of give a little bit of understanding in relation to Magha Nakshatra. Magha Nakshatra is connected to the Pitrus, the ancestral deities, right? One of their functions is to guide the lives of their descendants, so to speak, right? They guide the lives of their descendants, but they try not to interfere too intensively. Why? Well, you know, existing here on planet Earth requires a strong ego in the good sense, right? I don't mean being egotistical. I mean it requires a strong ego. You have to be able to trust in yourself. You have to be able to make good decisions, things along those lines. And so the Pitrus want us to make good decisions, right? And to try to trust in our own judgment. But they equally don't want us to be proud. So what they'll do is they'll drop subtle hints. subtle hints of things that need to happen. But if we're too proud, we won't pick up on those subtle hints. We won't see them at all. So, things that you can do are to be humble. Other things that you can do are to honor your ancestors, things along those lines. Those are good things to do in connection with Magha Nakshatra. Okay, let's look at some other things that we are. Somebody's saying Magha Nakshatra and caring for mother who's in the hospital. That's a good thing to do. I'm sorry to hear about your mother. Okay, so let's see what else we've got going on here. Okay, I'm tempted. So people tell me some of the things that are going on in your life, or if you have any eclipse questions, you can do that too, right? Do I think there are aliens? You see them all the time, but what does alien mean, really? That's kind of a deep question. That's what I would ask in association with that. Okay. Everybody can be an alien. I feel like I'm an alien sometimes. Okay. So let's see some other questions that we've got going on here. I tend not to focus too much on yogas by transit, really. Because I find quite often yogas are not qualified properly because you have to judge the strength of the planet and everything like that. So yogas can be a big focus, but in terms of natal charts, you need to qualify the strength of the yoga. In terms of transits, it's just, it becomes a little too analytical to get into that. I'd much rather just look at transits, what's happening in that regard. So does it impact more if you are in the path versus not? It can, yes. It also impacts if you're in a dasha period that is going to be triggering any of the planets that are being influenced by the eclipse, by angle, okay? What's the theme from the universe with this eclipse? It's not somebody else's problem, and you may think that it's yours, and it is not your problem either. It's just your responsibility, and you can deal with that responsibility. And if something sucks in your life, you can kind of go, well, why does that suck? And you can go, why am I not being my own best friend, rather than turning around and blaming it on somebody else. There's also a certain degree of having a chip on one's shoulder and having something to prove, most especially in the areas that Mars rules in the chart. So look into those things and look if you feel like you have something that you're asking for validation on, because really that means on a certain level you're not validating yourself. And if you're not validating yourself, ultimately it boils down to a simple fact, which is you're not giving yourself what you need. And if you're not giving yourself what you need, then you need to take a look at how you can do a better job of doing that, because Mercury is retrograding through Purva Phalguni Nakshatra. Okay. If I had to sum it all up into one sentence, that's what I would say. How can eclipse affect exalted Mars? Somebody already asked that, right? And so I'm not going to give a prediction based on just individual factors in a person's chart. Since Ketu is ruling Magha, is there some inherent loss or separation we might experience, or would it depend on the placement of Ketu natally? Ketu's, I'm going to kind of answer that question in a roundabout manner, which is what Ketu does in terms of creating difficulty in a chart. Let's talk about Ketu and Rahu for a moment. That's a good thing to do, and that can kind of lead into answering that question. So Ketu on many levels can represent things that we're really good at, right? Things that we know, things that we're really familiar with, things that we've done over several different lifetimes. That's why we're good at them, or at least we're trying to be good at them, right? And we're familiar with them. So when we get hit with something that we don't know, we kind of go, right, well, I'm going to kind of retreat back to Ketu because it's what I do know, right? It's how I'm most likely going to respond to a situation, okay? And so then we kind of get into the habit pattern of responding to things in the same way over and over again in association with whatever Ketu's doing in our chart. until it reaches a point where we begin to feel like, yeah, you know what, this isn't really going anywhere. And I've been stuck in this same pattern for like such a long time, and I don't really feel like there's any movement in my life in that particular area. That's when Rahu comes into the equation and kind of takes you and pulls you in a different direction. And it makes you confront all those things that are underdeveloped, because Rahu represents where there's a weak karmic development. So it'll pull you in that direction. Only thing is it's going to take you into the unfamiliar to such a deep, deep, deep level, right? That eventually it freaks you out. And so then what happens? You run back to Ketu. So with Ketu and Rahu, there's always this swing from one pendulum arm to the other, right? The idea with Ketu and Rahu is to find the balance between. Now, your particular question was about Ketu and how it might separate things. Really, on a certain level, it ends up being more of Rahu that's doing the separation, because Rahu's pulling you away from what you're familiar with. If Ketu's doing the separation, Ketu's doing the separation because the separation needs to happen. Okay, that's one thing I would say in regards to that. Okay, let's not use this for, you know, like personal attacks on each other. If you want to do that, like, you know, go to a boxing ring or something like that. Okay, you know, this isn't like you know, playground really. Okay, can we get over it? Thanks. Eclipse hitting Leo ascendant, opposing my Jupiter in Aquarius. Well, it's going to be intense for whatever Jupiter rules in your chart. Look at how you might be afraid of losing face in those areas that Jupiter's connected with in your chart. That's a simple assessment. Not giving a prediction, because I need your entire horoscope, meaning all your Varga charts and everything like that. If one is going through a sun Mahadasha, what will be the impact of this eclipse? It depends on a lot of different factors, whatever the sun is ruling in your chart, what houses it's ruling, what karakas it is in terms of the Jaimini system. You need to look at all of those things, but it is going to be a more intense experience for you, right? So you can do your own interpretation of that. Look at where the sun is ruling in your chart, right? But don't try to make some detailed, concrete prediction on that just based on your Rashi chart. Okay, you can, you know, look, you can get a general idea, but not just, you know, you're not going to be able to get super detailed just based on your Rashi chart. Okay. All right, let's look for some more questions. I'll talk a little bit more about the eclipse, you know, for a second or two. The sun's really powerful during this particular eclipse, right? So it marks a period of time where, well, eclipses are always about the evolution of the self, but even more so with this particular eclipse. It's a super strong sun because it's happening in Leo. So this gives a lot more opportunity for growth. Keep your chin up, but remember that dignity and pride are two different things. Don't confuse dignity with pride. Dignity is something that cannot be diminished, right? It cannot be diminished. Pride is something that can be hurt. Okay? Understand those two things, and that'll really help you through this particular eclipse. Okay, let's see some of the other questions that are here. How do the aspects of natal chart impact someone's life versus the D9 chart? Okay, that's a good question. There will be different theories on that particular question. It's a little bit off topic, but let's go into it anyway. Okay, so basically, I'm going to talk about the natal chart versus the Navamsa chart overall, and that'll help you to understand those two things. So the natal chart, the Rashi chart, is a Varga chart. Okay, it's a Varga chart that represents the life path of the individual. It's a Varga chart that represents the individual becoming themselves and the things that they experience on the path to becoming themselves, right? So for instance, if you're in the dasha of the sun and the sun rules your seventh, well, your life path is very focused on relationships. You're learning about yourself through relationships, right? But let's say, for instance, if your Rashi chart and you're in the dasha of the sun and the sun rules the sixth house, right? Does that mean you're not going to have a relationship? No, it doesn't, Because if the sun has a 9th or a 7th agenda or something like that in the Navamsa chart, and the sun's strong enough to create a relationship, it can create a relationship, but it just means that relationships aren't really a big focus of your life, right? That's kind of the difference between the Rashi chart and Varga charts in general. So difference between the Rashi chart and the Navamsa chart. Navamsa chart represents those things that you find meaning in. It also represents our capacity to make wise choices in life that make us feel like we're living a life filled with purpose and meaning. And that's why it relates to the soul, right? It's relevant to the 9th house, okay? So a lot of astrologers just do readings with the Rashi chart and the Navamsa chart. And I'm not saying that you can't do that. I think a lot of astrologers do that because of not having an accurate birth time sometimes. And so they just want to be able to do what they can. And generally it's safer with that. But you can do much better astrology if you're using all the Varga charts. But you have to understand what the Varga charts are about, okay? Let's look at some of the other questions. Somebody says, Magha ascendant, sun and Mercury with moon in Aquarius. How should I try to honor the Petries today? Bit concerned. I am in Saturn, Jupiter dasha. Saturn is my bitter, Jupiter is. Okay, well, one thing I would say overall is I'm just going to give you a very simple thing. Yes, this is a bridge. I would say that first of all. This is, a very powerful period for you for change. I'm just kind of scrolling up. I'm not going to go into a detailed prediction, but you're not asking for a prediction, but you're saying, how should you try to honor the Petries today? So I need to create a visual representation in my head for myself so I can get a good idea of what we're talking about. Some people can picture the planets in their head. I'm one of those people that I really need to kind of see it in a chart. It just functions better for that. So, okay, so Sun, Mercury, and Moon in Aquarius. Okay, so let's look at that. So really on a certain level, it's about your relationship with yourself, your relationship to your friends, your relationship to your family. It's really quite simple in that particular regard. I'm just going to go a little bit deeper, though, because you also mentioned the dasha that you're in. Saturn, Jupiter dasha. Okay, so it's bringing your attention to relationships, but primarily your relationships to your family and your relationships to your friends. Since you asked about family, I'm going to go there. Today would be a good day to spend time with your family, right? And spending time with your family, honor everybody that's come before you and recognize the family heritage in the family that's surrounding you. Recognize what an opportunity you've been given through being brought into creation, right? You've been given a chance to work through your karma, right? That's a big one. That's a simple thing that I would say. You're a bit concerned. I wouldn't say that there is, I don't know which of your family members is still alive, but I would watch out for, conflicts over family, about the way you were raised and things like that. Those are things to really kind of look out for. But it's about relationships with family overall. So if you wanted to know how to honor the Petries, spend time with family. Recognize family that's come before that may have passed on already. Try to see your ancestors, if you have children, in your children, right? Things like that. Okay. Simple things. People quite often think they have to do some magical thing or something like that, but sometimes it's the simple things that mean the most. Okay, so we've got a little more time, probably about another 10 minutes. I'm going to take a drink while people put some more questions in the window. And the reason I didn't go more into detail with that, Lisa, is because really I need your full horoscope. And I would need to take a look at your Dwadashamsha, a lot of other stuff, okay? Is this eclipse a good time to start creative projects? If you feel a creative urge, start a creative project, okay? What do I think about planets in 29, 0, or 1 degrees? I work with things in terms of degrees in a different manner. I use what are called the Baladi avastas, okay? Where if you have a planet between, I'm going to kind of give you a quick rundown. If odd signs, let's talk odd signs. So we're talking Aries, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, and Aquarius. Those are the odd signs. Even signs are Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, Scorpio, Capricorn, and Pisces. So if you have a planet at 0 to 6 degrees of an odd sign, or 24 to 30 degrees of an even sign, that planet is Bala, which means that planet is an infant. Okay? Think of what infants can do, right? If you told an infant to, go build a house, is that infant going to be able to do that? Well, no. It might be able to go to the site and, play with the hammer while you're building it. And so in that level, you're helping the infant to build a house by bringing it with you to build the house, right? So infant planets can create concrete things in life, but they need help. They need assistance from other planets, okay? But if they happen to be in a great enemy sign or debilitated, it's going to be very difficult for them to create things, and those things can fall apart. Why? Because then they'll be in a state called asleep. Okay, so let's talk about Kumara planets, which are 6 degrees to 12 degrees of an odd sign, or 18 to 24 of an even sign. Kumara planets are youthful. They're exuberant. So they can create concrete things, right? All on their own. But if they happen to be in a great enemy sign or debilitated, or in some cases an enemy sign, they become sushupti, right? They become asleep, okay? So Lisa said, I need to get a reading with you soon. Please just go to my website. You can schedule something in. I have availability after the first week of September, I believe. Okay. So basically, just give me a second here. So planets, I should correct myself. When planets in a great enemy sign and debilitated, they will be sushupti. Okay. So then we've got planets that are Yuva. They're between 12 and 18 degrees of either an odd or an even sign. Those are adult planets. They're able to create things too. I'm going to kind of speed through this process. Planets between 18 to 24 of an odd sign or 6 to 12 of an even sign are Vritta. They're old. They have a hard time creating things. They're ready for those things to kind of pass on from their life, okay? And planets that are Mrita, which is 24 to 30 of an odd sign or 0 to 6 of an even sign. Those planets have a difficult time creating concrete things. Now, can these planets that seem to be non-functional create concrete things? Yes, they can if they're placed in the 10th house, okay? So there you go. There's some simple understandings of degrees and how they impact things. Somebody's saying, studying astrology for a while, want to be on your channel. If you will allow me, I tend to select people to come on to my channel. That's how I do things, okay? So not trying to be a snob. It's just I tend to select things. That's the process I go through. All right. Okay. So let's see what else we've got here in the window. But that's how I would answer the question about 29, 0, or 1 degrees. Planets generally in those degrees, they're going to be weak. Because they're either, if they're in an odd sign, they're either Mrita. If they're in an even sign, they're Bala, and they're going to be a little bit weak. Yeah. 0 to 1 degrees, it's going to be the same thing. There's more of a propensity for those planets to be weakened on one level or another. Okay. All right. Let's see what else we've got here in the window. Okay. I love it that people are conversing, but I'm looking for some questions from somebody. Okay, so please feel free to come out with any question. We're making it on the eclipse, but if you have something else coming up, then we'll look at that too. Struggling with house system, seeing as it shifts my 4-planet stellium from 5th house to 6th. What do I use? You're asking me to give you a 2-minute explanation of something that takes about 2 to 3 hours. Okay, I'll try. I use house cusps, but it's not like a house cusp system like one would use in Western astrology, where you're looking at, say, the second cusp and the third cusp, and in between is the second house. Instead, you're looking at the specific degree point of the cusp as being the house cusp. Okay, I can recommend lots of mantras, but it depends on what you're asking for a mantra for. Right. So, and I'd have to look at your horoscope for that, not just based on a couple of things in your chart. So in answering your question about houses, I tend to use both the equal house and house cusps side by side. And that seems complex to a lot of people, but it tends to give you greater accuracy. Okay. But, you know, that's a very in-depth explanation, something that requires a lot of depth to explain how to really work with it in a functional manner. Okay, I like using house cusps, and I'll tell you why. Because house cusps have nakshatras. So you can tell how an individual is going to grow a particular house by looking at the house cusp nakshatra. That's a good thing to do. Gives you a lot of depth. I would not prescribe you a mantra just by you telling me mantra for a weak sun in 0 degrees Magha and ascendant. It's like going to a doctor and saying, I'm pretty sure I have cancer. Can you give me chemotherapy? You know, it's sure mantras aren't really going to hurt anything, right? So you could do any mantra for the sun, really, I suppose. But I don't like giving people mantras for things unless I've looked at their horoscope. Okay, so I'm not trying to be standoffish. I just don't believe in giving therapy to people based upon 2 or 3 factors in their chart. Okay. All right, let's see some other questions here, not like rattling off just things in your chart. Okay, which people tend to do. And I recognize you do it because you've got me here and you really want to take advantage of it. And I appreciate that. And I feel so respected. I feel so respected by that. Yes, Radhika, house cusp nakshatra does really work. It's a very powerful thing. Okay. I feel so respected by that, but I also just don't want to give assessments based on just a few factors. Yeah, and Amy is saying something that's right. Your sun is not weak if it has the highest Shadbala, but it can be weak in certain areas of your life, dependent upon in your Varga chart, right? But it's weak and it's not weak, which means it has the power, but you're having trouble accessing it in that area of your life. Okay, but in terms of giving you mantras for the sun, that's something you could probably find yourself if you're trusting your own judgment of that. And mantras can't do any harm. Okay. All right, let's see what we've got going on here. Let's see what some other people are saying. So if you would like for me to look at your horoscope for you, any of you, I have like several different levels of astrological service on my website. You can go to my astrological services page and schedule something in. I have a 1-question service, which is basically for $75. If you have one question, I can give you an answer to that question. Everything all the way up to my higher tiered services, which are $249, and they include a karmic analysis plus 4 questions. Okay, so if you'd really like for me to look at things for you, I really do recommend doing that. And it's mainly because in that way, I'm able to go fully into your chart. And any other way, I would just be looking at things and, you know, making a guess assessment, which I don't do. And that's why I don't do that. How will eclipse affect recent breakup? I can't tell you how it would affect your breakup because really, and I'm not trying to be difficult, I need to look at your full horoscope, not just your Rashi chart and not just your Navamsa chart. I tend to go through a lot of the different Varga charts because the Varga charts will interact with each other, right? Hey, stop hitting people up inside of my chat window here, okay? So basically, when we look at that, for instance, I might look at your Rashi chart and see you're in a period that's kind of bringing your siblings to the surface. So then I'll go look at the Drekana and I'll see what's going on with that. And I'll also potentially go look at your Dashamsha chart, see what might be happening with your associates at work. things along those lines, okay? So I tend to not do things just based on just the Rashi, because it's going to give you inaccurate information. You need to go more in depth with it, okay? All right, let's see what else we've got. Is the moon flat like the Earth? Is a pancake flat like a waffle? Is an egg flat like a piece of paper? I don't do things based on other people's charts because I feel like it's an invasion of another person's privacy. So if I have the person's permission, then I'm able to do that. But I don't do it otherwise, because otherwise it's kind of like taking a peek at somebody when they don't want you watching and invading their privacy. D60 has a lot of weight. It does. That's why it's really important to get your birth time rectified. And it's important to get your birth time rectified with house cusps, because then you're going to have your birth time rectified in a manner that your birth time is going to at least be accurate within 30 seconds. And then you can incorporate all sorts of things like house cusp nakshatras into interpreting the D60 if you want to. But the D60 sets the ceiling for all the other Varga charts. And I like using the analogy. I used this in my class the other night. Let's say you have this 7-foot-high basketball player, right? And they're in a room where there's a basketball goal, where the rim's going to be about 10 feet high, roughly. Okay, and they've got a 10-foot ceiling in the room. Is that person going to be able to jump and put the ball into the hoop? Probably not, because the ceiling's too low, right? But if you put that same person in a room that has a ceiling that's, say, 30 feet high, or, like a coliseum where it has a really high ceiling, they'll be able to be more effective in doing that. And that's kind of how it works. That's why that's why the D60 is very important. It sets the ceiling for all the other Varga charts. But sadly, in most instances, we don't have the opportunity to work with the D60. One thing you can usually trust with the D60 is the fact that your planets are usually going to be in the right places if you're certain of your birth time within, say, 5 to 10 minutes, unless you have the moon close to the edge of a sign. Then the moon can change, right? But the rest of your planets, they're not going to change, if they're close, like let's say they're within 1-2 degrees of the edge of a sign, they're not going to change in like 5, 6, 7, or 8 minutes. I have a question to solar eclipse. Is it recommended to watch it via NASA live session, or is it not a good idea? Really the way I feel about all of that is I'm not superstitious about those things. It's your perception of how things will work will, on a very deep level, create your reality. So if you're superstitious and you perceive that it's going to create a hard time for you, then it might create a hard time for you. Okay? All right, another minute or two, and then I'm going to be saying goodbye, people. But I thought I would remind you, you can always, if you want me to take a look at your horoscope for you, I will reiterate. It is not important that you've missed the eclipse in order to understand how the eclipse is going to impact you, because I had a lot of people getting frantic about trying to fit their consultation in before the eclipse. And on a certain level, it doesn't really matter, because the next 6 months are going to be prominent too. So if you want to schedule something, go to my astrological services page at AuthenticAstrology.com. and you can sign up for something. Okay, everybody, I think that I'm going to leave now. It was wonderful connecting with everybody as usual. Have an excellent, excellent, excellent day. Keep calm. Enjoy yourself. Spend some time meditating today. Spend some time, enjoying yourself. Spend some time enjoying your family if you have a family too. That's always a good thing to do. Okay, thank you, everybody, and please do take the very best care of yourself. Bye now.